T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Kush'S Korner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight, my co-host Alex Myers and I have the pleasure of being joined by Bryan Waterloo, a name that is synonymous with lace monitors here in the United States. Tonight, we're going to be doing a little bit of a dive into the history of the species in the U.S. hobby. We're going to get into a lot of awesome stories. Very excited to get into the episode. But before that, as always, USARC. So USARC is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to live this lifestyle that we all enjoy so much with our animals. Please check out usarc.org for all of the information that there is to be known about the organization. If you're not already a member, please look into becoming a member of USARC. As a community, we have strength in numbers, and the more people that are behind the cause, the better. And thank you to everybody for being with us tonight. Coming off of the Pomona Reptile Super Show weekend, the show was really incredible. Got to meet a lot of awesome people, see a lot of old friends that really only get to see once or twice a year out at the Cali shows. And really, despite everything going on in that area recently, it was a great show. Really, a pretty huge turnout, a lot more than a lot of us expected, I'd say. And really an overall awesome weekend. So thank you to everybody who, showed up at the show, who stopped by the booth, said hi. It was really a great weekend overall. For anyone else, in the future, I would highly recommend you checking out the Reptile Super Show in Pomona, California. There's also the one in Anaheim, California as well in the summer. Definitely we'll be back there for June for the next one. But without any more rambling, let's bring Alex on. What's going on?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. And looking forward to this episode tonight. I'm super excited. Brian's an awesome guy.
Yeah, thank you for setting this up. This is full credit to Alex for making this episode happen. This was fully executed by Sir Alex Myers.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't known him as long as many other people within the industry have, but he's just been a really good guy to talk to. I've gotten a lot of insight from him, something that I've personally just learned from networking with various peoples is that even if in the case of Brian and his lace, I don't keep any monitor lizards currently, but the way he, I guess, works with his lace, the way he sort of organizes them as a breeding project, and between his stories of like the history with the species in captivity, I definitely translate a lot of those ideologies onto the lizards that I am quite passionate about. And so sometimes it's just good to hear insight from everybody. You wouldn't think lace monitor and Hydrosaurus ever really overlapping, but at the same, a lot of the stuff that he's just shared from his experiences, I've been able to apply to mine and the ones that I'm still learning. So overall, I think this episode is going to be one for the books, especially pertaining to his history with this species in captivity. There's no denying that lace monitors have surged in popularity in the past, probably would say 5-6 years. And Brian has been one of those guys from the start with them as far as propagating and getting them established in United States herpetoculture. So without further ado, I say we bring him on.
All right, let's do it. Hey, Brian, how's it going?
Hey, guys. Thanks for the invite, and Alex, thanks for the kind introduction.
Most welcome, man. Like I said, we're really happy to have you on. Thank you again for, I wouldn't say short notice, but I know I reached out to you last week on this, and I just figured your knowledge and work with this species, and you're not an unfamiliar guest on the Trap Talk Network by any means. And from what I understand, most of the episodes you've done in the past have sort of been on the care, the cycling, the reproductive husbandry of various in captivity. And as I previously just said, the fact is, a lot of people seem to be wanting them, getting them. They're just overall more popular, it seems. And again, you've been breeding them for a long time, without a doubt. One of the founders of this species. You were just talking earlier about a lace that Stephen had worked with. I had worked with that individual. I had no idea you produced it, which is just crazy for me to think, like, how many others are out there that people don't know that are without a doubt more than likely produced by you. And yeah, we wanted to have you talking about how amazing this lizard is and sort of everything that has led up to them to where they are today. 6 years ago, probably would not have heard people talking how a lace was on their dream reptile list. It was definitely something uncommon. A handful of people had them, one being you, of course. And we just want to get straight into it. Where did it start with lace for you specifically?
When I was younger, like third grade, we transitioned from like dinosaurs. That kind of kicked off, I guess, my interest in reptiles altogether. My one true love is actually Nile monitors. I love Niles. I love ornates. They've always been like way up there, probably even with lace. But like I said, we were talking backstage, so people that weren't aware of that. I found an encyclopedia. It was like your big, thick, old encyclopedias from back in the day. And this picture, which I'm going to show you guys, this was in that encyclopedia. And I wasn't really sure what it was. And then because it just says a monitor lizard. And I come to realize that this is actually a lace monitor. And that was probably when I was, I don't know, 6th grade, something like that. And I was just infatuated with them. And then the more I started learning about more monitors, and then that picture just was like burnt in my mind. And, lace became like the number 2. I had the Niles, and then the lace were like right here. And it just opened up just a whole range of wanting to learn about them, wanting to understand them, wanting to learn, just everything about them. And then, as years go by, unfortunately, lace monitors are Australian. Australian monitors were like next to impossible to get in the States for, I don't know how many years. I mean, obviously, like Acantherus, your spiny tail monitors kind of hit the scene in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then there were a couple that trickled in, and basically it was kind of a, I don't know, hit or miss with them. You would see them, they'd pop up every once in a while. Frank Reedus back in the day had, I think, a trio of them or whatever. But it was always hit or miss with him breeding them. If he claimed, but I'm not trying to start a tit for tat, but there was just some inconsistencies with some of Frank's stuff, but he did produce them. He was probably one of the first guys that did. And then those hatchlings that he produced, unfortunately went to the wayside. People weren't able to do anything with them, and then they kind of petered out. And then John Egan, who's out in Colorado, he was able to get them, and actually he had quite a group of them. And he was probably the first guy after Frank to breed them without knowing he bred them, because I remember back in the day there was Varanus NL, which was a real big monitor lizard form. It was great. It was based out of the Netherlands, but it connected, the world. And he might have even posted it on the old King Snake monitor forums. But he had a hatchling just walking around his cage. He had a big enclosure, and he bred them, and he's like looking in his cage one day, and he can see like a little hatchling just running around the side wall, and so not only did he breed them, or cycle them, but successfully breed them, but that hatchling was able to incubate and hatch after I don't know how many months and repopulate out of the ground, which was kind of cool. And then that was it. It would they petered out. And then fast forward to, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I heard John and Dragnon was going to bring some in. And they had already come in. Don Church had got some. John Egan got some. I caught wind of it, got a hold of John, and John brought in a batch, and I was able to start making up my, my established groups out of them. But that big male picture that I sent Steve, you could pop that up at whatever time.
Yeah.
So that male, he came in with the group that was going with John Egan. And he, unfortunately, was so big compared to the rest of the animals that he's like, I got to separate them. That male ended up going to Burl Walters out in Georgia. And I ended up with it after some back and forth. You could close that picture now. Okay. So basically, that was probably my second lace, because my Belle, who's currently on breeding loan with Quetzal and Ari down there in Texas at their zoo. I got that Belle. He was a hatchling. And then I ended up with that giant not that much longer. Okay. And then Dragna had brought in a couple more. And there was a conflict with the trio that came in. I ended up with the Belle, and then the other two, I think they were supposed to go to Ty Park, and Ty, I don't know, he backed off on the deal. And then the following, was it October or whatever, John had him in Orlando, and a buddy of mine who I didn't know at the time, mutual kind of friend, he bought them. And it turned out they were both females. And I ended up with both of those females on a breeding loan with the Belle. And then that's how my established, group of them began. Now, Burl, Don and John were still kind of ahead. In fact, Don was already breeding them. John was not that far behind. So I had some catching up to do, and it took me a little bit, I think like a year and a half, to where I started getting to where I'm getting eggs, getting another clutch, so on and so forth. So, between the three of us, I guess we were like the first three that really established it to where it wasn't like a one-off or, once or twice a year, every couple of years. We were consistently, doing it. You fast forward to now, there's multiple people that have been breeding them, which is great because, it's a species that I'm hoping doesn't go to the wayside like a Bengal monitor back in the day where, Danny Gorman bred the hell out of them and, was selling them at a reasonable price. And they were, he was offering them like every year, at least a couple hundred of them, not over the, a year, but over the course of the period that he was breeding them. And you can't find them anywhere. Nobody's got them anymore. And you can't get them now. Right. So I'm glad they have a foothold in the country, and I'm glad that people are working with them and they're keeping them established and they're keeping them, relatively available to, not so much, not classify a novice to an expert to a this or that, but making it within, range where, like my situation where, when I was in my early 20s, I would have, robbed the bank to freaking get them because of how bad I wanted them, because of how much I really loved them. And it sucked because when they did pop up, they were unbelievable. I mean, 15, 12 grand
Sure.
back in like, early 2000s, late 90s. It's like, you might as well be buying a freaking house.
Right.
So it's been a long journey to get to this point with them. And I mean, I went to Europe to basically get them from the established groups that were out there, which is actually the lace that are out here came from Europe. I know everybody's like, oh, they're smuggling. It's like, no, they're European stock. But George Horn and Gerard Visser. So George Horn, if you know monitors, you know who George Horn is. If you don't, you should. Him and Visser were, like pioneers back in the day. They first bred lace monitors, I think, in like 1985, and then I think Horn bred them in like 1988 at his house or whatever. But Gerard Visser was the head reptile curator at the Netherlands Zoo, or the Rotterdam Zoo, sorry. And George Horn was actually, he was a chemist professor. But they're both Australian, or not Australian. They're both big monitor guys. Germany is like monitor mecca outside of Australia. So a lot of the great German herpetologists, especially the monitor guys, a lot of them, they're German. So when I went out there, basically, I went to the Rotterdam Zoo and I saw their group there. They had hatchlings and had their adults and all that. And then I got to go to Horn's house in Germany and hung out with him. And holy shit, he had like everything under the sun. Like crocodile monitors, calming eye, Molinas. He had a true Gould's monitor that was freaking awesome.
Wow.
He had a bunch of lace, but because of the work them two had done, there was just populations of lace monitors all over Europe. And in fact, me and Horn did, we went to the zoo, and I'll show you some pictures again. So this, unfortunately, the photos I have of this were crap, because I'm with George, and we're at the Bonn Zoo, and the enclosure is just enormous. And all the lace are way up at the top. And again, I'll show you the pictures to give you a frame of reference. And at the time, the euro dollar wasn't intact. It was still, Deutschmarks and guilders. And so the money was all mixed up. And I have, my 35 millimeter camera with me, and I didn't have enough film. And I'm trying to like, hey, George, can you buy me a roll of film? And the little bit of film that I had left, when one of the curators noticed George was there with me, and they said something in German to get the lace to come out. So he came out with like a bucket of chickens, and all the lace started coming down. But when we got there, like, here, this was that enormous freaking cage. And if you look close, there's a big male lace monitor at the very bottom there. I don't know if you can see him.
You can lift the image up a little. Oh, yeah, there you can see him.
I can see him now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was big, dude. He was every bit of 6 foot plus. So for frame of reference, you can see how big that enclosure was. And then all the lace, like, they were all up here and over here, like all up the top. So I'm trying to take pit, and I'm like, there's no point to it. So he finally got him to come down. And then throughout the rest of the reptile house, there was a couple other enclosures that there was more lace into. So basically, they had like a nice foothold of it. And at the end of the trip, basically, Visser was going to send me lace for free. He's like, I'll just send them out on, you could have them for a breeding loan. He's like, but George, because he's the other half of it, needs to sign off and be like, yeah, I'll do it. And unfortunately, George was reluctant, not on behalf of me, because I basically, had been writing to him and contacting them guys, and they knew how much of a lace freak I was. And they're like, just come out here and, we could discuss this in person. This was right after when I went out there is when Varanus Panoptes Horni was named after George Horn, and he had sent, I don't know, a group of them to Miami Metro Zoo, I believe it was. I'm not sure. Don't quote me. Like, oh, he said it was that for sure, but it was a zoo in Florida, and from what I understand, it was supposedly Miami Metro, and there was some kind of mix-up in the paperwork with CITES. Either a couple numbers were off or a couple letters were off. Like it was, is this an A or is it an O kind of a deal? And they confiscated all of the lizards.
Oh, wow.
So George was like, well, screw you guys. He's like, I'm not sending any of them to anybody then because, I don't want this to happen again. Because normally when they confiscated them, if they sent them to, whatever zoo, or if they just put them down or what happened. But either way, Horn got screwed out of it. Like, it definitely burnt his ass, and I don't blame him. So he was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
So that kind of, for a while there, killed my, again, another bunch of time invested to try to get them. So it just, it petered out. I do remember like 3 or 4 years later, I was contacted by Mark Bayless, who was another monitor guy back in the day, who was actually how I met George. But he got a hold of me. He's like, hey, Horn is trying to get a hold of you. He's, he wants to sell some of his lace. So I finally got a hold of George again. And, again, it was like another insane amount of money. And I'm like, there's no way I could do it. Supposedly, those animals were sold to some guy named Steve Blaine in Canada. I don't know how true that story is, whatever happened with it, but it just, after that, it died down. That was it. And then as life went on, I just, kind of gave up a little bit there, kept trying. And then, like I said, the whole Dragna bringing them in for church, and John Egan, and then Burl had some, and all. It kind of re-sparked it, and then they became available. So it, of course, I don't know, 20 plus years, something like that, to just get to that point to where not only were they available, but also I could afford them at the time. I mean, that bell that I bought, that first bell, it was $10,000.
Yeah.
And, it's definitely a hard nut for the average hobbyist to, and that's how I relate, I guess, to some of these customers I had, that it's like, I get your point, and it's a hard nut to swallow when you're a lot younger and you got bills and this, and like, oh yeah, here's that lizard that you dreamed your whole life of getting. By the way, it's $10,000, so
right.
it's hard. And I feel for, people that had the passion like I do for species, and, you're faced with that reality. Thankfully, they're not that expensive anymore. Sure. I actually sell mine for a reasonable price, but, it's just, I guess, the ebb and flow of this hobby. The only thing I can relate it to right now is the price on Bolins, which are insane. The Bolins, when I got mine, I think I paid $6,000 for them, or $5,000
individually, or for a group.
No, for the two. It's $2,500 for the pair. That's what it was. And they were a special pair too. Those were the ones that Ari had in his book. Those are the first captive-born ones by Danny Gunelin. So I ended up with a pair of them, and they were relatively affordable, and then their prices were starting to drop. I mean, as adults, I couldn't give them away. When I ended up finally selling them to actually buy my bell, it's kind of how, everything goes back to the start. But now you look at, Nerd's got them for $12,000. Scott selling his for 10, but Scott put in the work. So shout out to Scott Flood for doing his work and making it happen. And, I can't argue his price. Just need to kick Ari in the ass, add a little competition here. So, because I think that it's something that I think is gonna, it helps, but it doesn't, because it's just, it's hard to bust a nut on, dumping 30-40 grand on a couple Bolins and hoping that, hey, everything works out. Not to rip Scott. Like I said, Scott's doing a great job, and I love the guy to death. I talk to him all the time. Same with Ari. Like I said, Ari actually had my Bolins. And when I had mine, I came, according to Scott, he's like, you're real freaking close. All you needed was another male, and you probably would have done it. Because my female built a nest. I had mid-body swelling. I mean, she was, my male was constantly spurring them, the whole 9 yards. But anyway, not to get sidetracked on Bolins.
No worries.
So
we love talking Bolins. So
yeah,
but they're.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, first off, I didn't realize how big of a presence Various had in Europe. Just between the photos of the zoo, and I understand in Europe, like, zoos are allowed to sell to private hobbyists and whatnot. So just in your opinion, between the people you mentioned who were working with lace, like, why do you think it just took aside from the bump in the road with I would say Mr. Horn sending the Pantopes horni? I said that's the Argus monitor subspecies, right?
Correct.
Papua? Right. Okay. I want to make sure I had the taxonomy right there. I think back to reading Bert Langerworth's books. He's bringing Australian water dragons all throughout Europe, and then even when with the, I guess you could say, introduction of CITES and appendix statuses being applied to different reptiles and amphibians and regulating that trade internationally, up until a few years ago, you could still import Australian water dragons from Europe for new bloodlines, even though they're probably all from birth. But relatively speaking, why do you think, I mean, I want to guess the price. It sounds like just there was such a demand for lace that they were just charging an exorbitant amount, and it just wasn't justifying them being able to come across. Because we think even some of the carpet python people, I want to say there's star pythons in Europe, really well known, the carpet python breeding group. And again, at the time, they could ship stuff overseas for breeding. And, I followed some of the carpet python people as far as how they keep track of lineages and whatnot for my own personal use with stuff. But again, it's just carpet python people were doing it. I know people could get other, bearded dragons being bred over in Europe, new morphs would pop, and then they send them to the US. And even in that timeline of decades where those forms of Australian wildlife, if you will, were going back and forth before that was no longer a thing. Why was lace always in Europe? Because like you said, it sounds like there were pockets of them all throughout Europe. And I'd really think, if there were that many, why haven't they shown up sooner? Do you just think, again, it's a cost? Do you think, I mean, I understand the Germans are very much more in tune with, breeding stuff and getting things dialed in. It just, I don't know, it just sort of seems shocking to me. We've got all these other things that at the time were going back and forth, and yet, even with, from what it sounds like, a good population of lace over there, why did it take this long, relatively speaking?
Honestly, because I don't think anybody asked. Not only that, I don't think they knew. The other half of it too, like you said, where the zoos in Europe are able to, sell to, private keepers and all that. The one thing I will kind of give Europe in general, which probably raised a hair on a couple people, especially Duraka, who's actually bred lace too. He just recently bred them. In fact, he's got his founding stock came from me. Those are hatchlings they produced, but he did it, and actually I got some hatchlings coming from him here pretty soon. But anyway, not to get off track. The Europeans, from conversations I've had with them and how they regulate stuff and all that, I think a lot of it is they do their homework, and they don't buy and then, hey, I'm going to build a cage, which unfortunately happens out here quite a bit. But the other half of it too is, I think I don't think they have a like the Rotterdam Zoo was like, oh, let's just go on, Europe. I think it was kind of word of mouth. And I think because, they're Australian animals. Not only that, they're, the upper echelon of stuff that,
Right.
It was something that was like, you'll never get lace. Nobody's got them in Europe. And then little by little, as the internet expanded, Facebook and social media in general and all that, and you're like, oh shit, you guys got lace? Oh yeah, we're breeding the crap out of them now. We got a whole bunch. Can you sell any? Well, yeah, yeah, we can, I guess, So I think it was not that people were pursuing it. I think people like me had been like, there's no way you're getting them. So fuck it,
Sure.
Just give it up and, maybe something will happen. I mean, kudos to John and Dragna for, I guess having enough people bugging him like, dude, can you get lace? And him being like, hey, let me see what I could do. And, going that route. So
I love the impression.
But I think that was a lot of it. It was that, it was just, I don't know, kind of like, yeah, there are species that everyone wants, but, there's so little of them that are in captivity out there that there's no way nobody's going to send them or even entertain selling them. It is sad, though, that now that I had a couple of years ago, I had like 27 hatchlings, and I got a hold of a guy in Europe, and I'm like, hey, I can move 10 of them out to you. And he's like, there's no point. He's like, it would cost more for the shipping and CITES and all that crap to send them out here. He's like, not only that, we're still kind of flooded with them, and we're selling them cheaper than you guys. So, there's like no upside to it.
Sure.
So it's interesting how it's gotten that way. But the other half of it too is, from my understanding, the last batch at least that did come in via Europe, like that following year, they clamped down on, I think Alex, I was telling you about that, or maybe it was you. They just, there was some bullshit going on about possibly, smuggled animals and all that. And they're like, nope, we're not entertaining, any exports or anything. So it became, kind of a moot point. As far as recently, I was talking to Mason Barnes, texting him the other day, and me and Mason were actually talking about getting more lace from Europe. Okay. And he was telling me he, again, asked a Dragna about it, and my reply was, I'm like, dude, they clamp down on all that stuff. So I don't know if they're people still able to get them or bring them in, but I haven't heard anything since. And I think a lot of it too is because there are so many available. I mean, mainly they're Bell's phase, but you go on, MORPH market, there's, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them on there. So I think the demand for them is kind of petered out as far as, European stock.
I mean, at this point, is there really even a purpose of bringing more stuff in from Europe? Because the bloodlines, I'm assuming, are going to be roughly the same, right?
Well, that's the thing too, is my lace are from that Horn and Visser breeding. Here, I'll show you this picture again. I know some people will be like, I don't buy it, but I mean, literally, you see that lizard right there?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much how mine look. Black heads, some banding, some spots. That's a unique line of mine. The ones that Don Church, his normals that he produced mainly, I have 2 of them that are like that. They're the ones that they have a little more blue in them, a little more banding. And that line, I'm not sure, where that came from, or, again, whatever zoo in Europe, or, maybe there's something they just produced out, or, more stock that they had that they finally got around to breeding. But mine have always been very distinct with how they end up with, like I said, just solid jet black heads on them. And then, like I said, Don's had a lot of the blue in them. And there's, they're a mix. There's no real locality specific like that. That
Sure.
big lace that I showed you at the beginning of the show, and that big male that I was holding that you showed, those are like pure southern locality lace monitors, like
Okay.
like him. So here, this is another one here. And it's not that, they're because they have such a big range, from the whole eastern coast of Australia. Although Townsville is way up here in northern Queensland, going all the way down south into like Victoria and South Australia. So it's a huge range. I mean, you're talking from like Connecticut to Florida, and you have corn snakes. So they're gonna look different from one area to the next. But like, this is a pure southern locality lace monitor. That is like the bread and butter. That's really what I want. And it's like that big male. And again, that's probably why I really fell in love with them, because of that solid jet black and white banding on them, which is phenomenal. But that is more of a southern locality. As you go further north, the banding starts to break up a little bit. And then you go really, like the ones I've seen out in Queensland, like at the, Glass House Mountains, like where Steve Irwin was at, way up north there. They had a lot of spots and not a lot of banding to them.
Okay.
So there is a variation in pattern, but the lace that are here and the lace that were in Europe, I think a lot of it, not to be a dick, but, I think with a lot of them are like, dude, the lace is lace, just breed it. Who cares what how different they look? We'll produce fucking lace, which I get and understand. But that seems to be like the breakdown with the ones that are out here is just, there's no specific, this one is a Queensland locality. This one, it's kind of like, carpets, where carpets seem to have like a very distinct, like, locality to them. Or with the lace that are out here, you can't pinpoint, these are coming from here, and these are coming from here, and so on and so forth. Which is kind of, I don't know, which irritates me at times with some of the people that don't really know about lace as much as I do, and localities and all that. And they're like, oh, I had this super blue, whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's just a lace that's got a lot of blue in it. That's it. It's not a blue locality lace monitor. It's just a lace that's got some blue in it. End of story. So, it's unfortunate that, like I said, we don't have that option where we can get locality specific, lace monitors from Europe via Australia. It'll never happen. So.
Right. Well, considering that being the case, how do you think somebody should put together a lace project to kind of best preserve what we have currently, and not to just throw a hypothetical lace pair together just for the sake of making more laces?
Well, at this point, Steve, I don't think it matters. Like I said, there's really, I'm trying to like mainline the lace that I have now. A couple years ago, I produced, and I'll have a photo of it. It's on my phone. It was dead in the egg, but it was like heavily banded baby. And basically, the sibling of that one is in my garage right now, in my barn.
Okay.
Cooling off. So I'm planning to breed her this spring, but this is what I was trying to refer to. She thankfully, was siblings to this particular lace, but this is what that one looked like.
Whoa.
It was banded like that.
Holy shit.
So, as far as, doing, or trying, if you got a group of lace or whatever to kind of like, hey, I'm going to, separate this one from that. It kind of doesn't matter. That particular situation, because that was my founding stock. It wasn't, mixed in with like animals that, came from like Don's line or Egan's for that matter. I'm hoping to produce a couple more like that. And at that point, then I will mainline those, and that's all I'll be breeding exclusively to try to keep producing those nice banded babies like that.
Sure.
But, I don't know if it'll happen or not.
Yeah.
It's a crapshoot at best, but that's kind of what I'm aiming towards. And
Okay.
like I said, the only upside is I have that sibling from that same clutch here, and then a couple other males that I have on loan that I could get back at any time are from that same bloodline. So I'm hoping to one day, have that happen. But as far as how it goes now, it doesn't. There's not a lot of people with a normal pattern breeding pair or whatever. It's always like a normal with a bell.
Sure.
So again, that seems to be the the current situation. Alec Nigerian, who
Yes, he's in here right now.
hi Alec, you fucker. He's got 2 normals from me. And he just hatched out, I think, 2 normals and a bell, or I don't know. His last egg he sent me pictures of. Fucker was upside down, but I guess it's coming out all right. But he's hopefully going to mix up my normals that he got from me with the normals that he produced from this bell times bell breeding. So curious to see how that goes.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, that'll be neat.
But
So
to get back to your original aspect, it's kind of like I said, at this point, if you have normals, I would say it's, might be worth your while to kind of keep breeding normal and normal.
yeah.
And, don't add any bell to it and see what, you're able to produce. Because that bandit, this guy, like I said, this was from 2 normals.
Yeah.
There was no bell mixed in there with it. So in a lot of ways, the bell aspect, you keep breeding the bell, you start getting, your super clean, super bell animals.
Yeah.
I think with the normals, which seem to be a little more in demand right now, who knows what you can end up with. So, yeah, at this point, if you got a normal from me and a normal from Egan or from Church, have at it. Again,
Sure.
there's no. I don't think you're not gonna. I don't know. I guess try to follow some specific lineage and be like, I definitely want to do this. I mean, there's no point to that.
Sure. Just kind of like finding a look and then kind of doing what you can to get there in however many generations it may take.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think a lot of it too is the availability, where
Sure.
like I said, with carpets and like green trees, and I mean, there's so many available that you can make that happen and concentrate. I mean, not saying there's guys out there be like, dude, I'm just going to work with making this blue normal and breed it with this blue normal and try to produce super blue, which is again, it's fine. There's something there, but yeah, it's just going to take some time.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess from your perspective, seeing kind of how this project has developed and kind of ebbed and flowed over the decades, what do you see as some of the main reasons why a species will become popular, will be bred by a few people, and then, in 10 years, you never see them again? Kind of like the Bengal monitor example you used earlier. Yeah. Like why from what you've seen over your years, does something like that happen? What's that trend?
I think a lot of it is a space, Lace are definitely not, a medium-sized monitor. They need, some room. I think that's a hindrance. I think the other half of it too is they're not that they're expensive, but it's a little bit of an investment. Lace definitely they they take a long time to cook egg wise. My average is like 245 days, but I've had, a couple go all the way up to 9 months. So they take a long time to cook. They're not very prolific. They're not a big clutch. You're looking at average 6 to 8 eggs. And, for the average person to sit on 6 to 8 eggs for 8, 9 months is kind of like, this sucks.
Sure.
I don't think currently, I can't see 10, 15 years from now them being completely out of
certainly. No, they'll be
rotation of everything. But again, it's monitors have always been like a hard target audience because they're not like snakes. I mean, I have a green tree python I haven't fed now in I think 4 weeks. He's the lowest maintenance thing I have, and he's just, I don't have to do anything with him. His cage is all bioactive. He's in a nice big cage, and he's the lowest maintenance thing I have. And he's just like your typical python, where it's like I don't really need to, or your colubrid or this or that. I mean, some colubrids. But that being said, there's that aspect of it, just the room. And then, I'm not going to lie, the year before, I was getting burnt out with breeding the lace because, there was just, everywhere I looked, there was just bells everywhere. And everyone is now trying to sell them. And then everyone's trying to screw each other on the price. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm one of the founding guys who, got them going out here. And now I'm going to compete with some schmuck who bred him the one time, and now he wants, to dump him. And he's like, I'll take $3,000 for a bell. And it's like, dude, you're fucking killing the market. So that I could see is being a kind of a deterrent with some people. But again, I think it's definitely a species that has that appeal, especially, you see a little hatchling bell and everyone's like, oh my God, dude, that thing's amazing.
Yeah.
And then 8 months later, after, you're sick of cleaning its shit every day and eating it out of house and home, it's like, all right, I'm going to get rid of it and work on, another project or something that's not as commanding. I mean, and that's unfortunately a lot of monitors in general, especially, your bigger stuff that gets over like 4 foot, once people get hit with that reality of like, hey, this animal requires a lot of attention and a lot of, space and a lot of maintenance with them and all that. I mean, you could say that with, a lot of these, bigger species of lizards. I mean, like the sailfins I was working with, thankfully I had Alex, helping me out with them. And thankfully he's got them now and he's doing a lot of work with them better than I could have. But, them too, fuckers every day, man, crickets and roaches. And I'm like, it's just not stop. It's just another mouth to feed. But yeah, Steve, not to wander too far off. I don't think they're going to disappear
for sure.
But I don't know. They might kind of dwindle down a little bit. But it's like any species out there where, hopefully, knock on wood, I produce a couple bandit ones like that, and there's a kind of a stall with lace, and then I pop up with one. That'll reignite everything. They'll be on fire again, the whole 9 yards. So, again, just the natural ebb and flow of how it goes. So,
yeah. Well, yeah, I think lace monitors are a great example of a species that, if you were a hardcore reptile nerd, let's say prior to like 2018, you knew what a lace monitor was. Most people probably didn't know what a lace monitor was, especially like kind of novice or, casual keepers.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like today or even like in 2020, what a lace monitor is.
Yeah.
Why do you think laces were able to gain that notoriety when a species like, for instance, we were talking about the Bengal monitor earlier, or like Niles or something like that, never really reached that level? Is it just how beautiful they are, or is it maybe part of the fact that they did have a high price tag? Like, what do you think?
Well, to compare them with Niles is unfortunate for Niles because they're, every year you can get them. Every year there's, 50 of them at a reptile show at any given point for, pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect. The Bengal thing, unfortunately, I think a lot of it is, a lot of us back then, monitor guys, we were still in our infancy as far as, I got a stack like this of letters, handwritten letters, correspondence from me, the guys in Australia, the guys in Europe, and just talking about, hey, how did you keep your lace monitor? What'd you keep, know? So back then, when the Bengals were relatively, in abundance, I think, unfortunately, some people really weren't, aware of what the Bengals were and their value, and like, holy shit, this is, once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. And I think the other half of it too is, again, monitor keeping was like, you kept one because you're like, all right, do I have a cage big enough for this thing? Because it's going to get, X amount of feet. Yeah. And, people weren't dedicated to it. And the monitor people that were still out there that were dedicated to it, it was like, hey, I can't afford it. I got so much room that I could dedicate to like reptiles. And if I get the Bengal monitor, or let alone two, my whole space for all my other reptiles, I have to get rid of.
Yeah.
So I think that was another aspect of, the beginning of really understanding good husbandry for monitors, especially the larger monitors. And then fast forward into the lace, the price definitely, plays in the factor. It's not like they're, $500 water monitor. I mean,
right.
You're definitely sinking some money into them. And, if you're looking to invest into them, I mean, it's like anything else. You got to put time into them. You got to hope that if you bought a couple, if you're able to do it, if not a single one, and then pair it up, once you determine, hey, I got a male or I got a female. I mean, again, a lot of these factors with monitors in general are always going to, be at the forefront of them being as popular as some of the smaller stuff like the tree monitors and like,
Sure.
Spiny Tails, Kimberleys, whatever, because, they're not as demanding as far as the amount of space required for them.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think it's, in a lot of ways, that's kind of been, the roundabout visibility of them. Like I said, Niles, you could always get them. The Bengals back in the day, people didn't, I guess, appreciate whatever. And then, the lace in the last 5-6 years, hey, I really want them. I can't believe they're here. I just can't afford them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I guess, the ins and outs of, I don't know, I guess the different ebbs and flow of how,
Sure.
this stuff goes at times. And then, again, it's not monitors. It's across the board with,
right.
the latest ball python, carpet phase, retic, dwarf, you name it.
So I guess if you're somebody who has a project that they're particularly passionate about, and it could really be anything, what do you think are some things that they could do to ensure that, like, give it, 10, 15 years from now, those animals are still around in the hobby, even beyond just themselves?
I don't know, be a good keeper.
Yeah.
Lace monitors, I mean, certain species of monitors obviously outlive certain species of monitors. Same with snakes, so on. But, lace monitors, they're a long-lived species, 40, 50, 60 years, no problem. Yeah. The upside to them is that they're temperate. So, like mine right now, they're cooling. It's 70 degrees in my barn. They haven't been fed in months. They haven't had any basking. I mean, it definitely adds longevity to their life because I'm basically treating them and keeping them as they would in nature. So I think a lot of it is if you treat them right and you take care of them right, they're a hardy species. They're pretty hard to kill. And, I don't think it's like there's a magic recipe, like, oh, you have to do this and do that, and you're golden. They're pretty hardy. And I think if you're, a good keeper in general, and, you're basically in tune with your captives, and you're not neglectful, and, you're a decent keeper, that they're not going to go anywhere, so I will give them that hardy aspect. So it's a lot to, lose them in regard if you're, not trying to. Other than that, I mean, they're long lived. So
yeah,
as far as, like you were asking, it's, it'd take a lot to, really mess up with them and be like, oh my God, I lost them.
Yeah.
It's, like some kind of nitto virus or something that, affected them. But outside of that, no. The only thing I think is, asshole laws and restrictions and regulations, and God knows what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
With something like that. But no, if you're a diligent keeper and you have lace, then, there's not a whole lot that, you could do to them to make them not be there for a long time. Yeah.
Absolutely. So another question I have for you: when these animals were first coming into the U.S., I guess not first, for like the second time, the wave that we kind of have now, the ones that John brought over, what were the thoughts of, you guys who were first going to be the ones attempting to breed them, as far as how to treat the normals and the bells phases from like a project standpoint of, mix them together, keep them separate? What were you guys thinking at the onset of it?
Honestly, I don't think any of us gave a shit. It was just the fact we have lace. Not only that, now this is the other aspect to it too, Steven. And this is where the bells thing, it annoys me because of how cheap they've become. But then it annoys me even more where people hold them in such high regard. Like, oh, dude, I need a super bell. But, and again, it's my old, like, be thankful they're fucking here. Bells back in the day was the super pipe dream. It was like, there is no way. You might have been dreaming. It'd been like, an albino Bolin's python. That's how bells were so far off the radar. So you were just lucky to even think about getting a lace, let alone a bell. Yeah. So when they did come in, Don might have been the only one who was like, well, let's see, why don't we do bell to bell? And, he definitely capitalized on it. Sure. But I don't think Don gave a shit. I think he was like, holy crap, I got lace and I have bells on top of that. Let's just fucking breed them. I was the same way. I didn't give a fuck. Yeah. If you had, the ugliest bell, which I've seen some freaking nasty ones, and just a hideous, it didn't matter. It was like, they're lace and there's bells in this equation. Do whatever you can, breed them. So I don't think there was any kind of a real selective, we have to save this for that, and we got to pair this. It was just balls out, like fucking get them done. So I think as like I said, Don kind of perfected, the bell to create the super bells and go that route, and it paid off in the long run for him. So God bless. But personally, I did not care, and John, I don't think he gave a shit either.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, was there even like a notion at that time that you could really refine these bells and make these really clean animals?
That aspect was always a possibility. I don't think it was something not without saying like, well, I'm sure if you breed this bell to this bell, you're going to produce at least one or two that are going to be just like really super clean. However, back in the day, this book came out. See that?
Okay.
The Guide to Modern Lizard, blah, 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 by Danny, what's his name here? Danny Brown. So, in this book, at the very end of the lace monitor section, and that book came out, I think, in 2000. I'll tell you right now. 2012.
Okay.
At the back of that book, when it discusses lace monitors, super bells are mentioned in there. And that was it.
Okay.
Everyone who's seen that book, and then I remember, you're Python guys.
Yes.
So in 2013, 14, whatever, do you remember when they put they were starting to put in the constrictor ban, retics and anacondas and all, whole 9 yards. So were you at Tinley at the very first March Tinley, which they put on because it was to fight that ban?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm there, and Jay Brewer from Prehistoric is there. And I bought a Grays monitor from Jay back in the day. And if you're not familiar with a Grays monitor, Steven, they're one of the few fruit-eating monitor lizards in the world.
Yeah, I've seen it at San Diego a few times.
There you go. So I had bought my Grays monitor from him, and me and him were talking, and I just got the lace, or I've had the lace. And I don't know how, but that Super Bell conversation came up, and he mentioned that book. He's like, "Well, it's in this book, and it's about these guys." He's like, "You can make the Super Bells, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Oh my god, here we go." It's a Python guy talking about monitor genetics, which are completely fucking different. But here we go. So yeah, that book, and I don't know how many people Jay had mentioned it, because Jay had lace at the store. Okay. I think actually Burl bought a female or a male from Jay when Burl first got him back in that whole Don and Egan and me circle. Yeah. But yeah, that was kind of the start of the whole Super Bell thing, because Danny Brown in his book, he broke it down where it was the technical genetic shit, which I'm completely lame to, with the autosomal, genetics of the male being, phenine type and blah, 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 and those other bullshit. And I'm like, whatever. So it became a contentious argument, because then it was like, all right, well, if it's a Super Bell, then you need to know the genetics of the bell itself. Were the parents bell the bell, and then were their parents bell the bell, or there was a normal now? It was like this whole long, convoluted, just circle jerk of trying to figure out, the genetics of it. And it was like, this is next to impossible. There's no way you're going to tell me where all these animals originated from. Unless and then the Australians just like took the Band-Aid and ripped it right off. And like, there's fucking bells everywhere, mate. And, it's like they're everywhere. It doesn't matter. They weren't for the longest time. Bells were always believed to be only found in New South Wales. Okay. And then over time, they're here, they're everywhere. So it might have been back in the day, they were only found in New South Wales because it was a higher concentration of them. And little by little, they just, expanded out of that territory. They're actually more fitting to like the western part of the lace monitor locality, where it's a little drier and it's a little more, montane. Mm-hmm. Like their pattern is well suited to like the desert, ironically.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
But that being said, that aspect of trying to figure out the genetics of it was just just an endless argument.
Yeah.
Another buddy of mine, you guys know Shane Costello.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So me and Shane, right? Yeah. Shane produced like some killer freaking water monitors, but me and Shane were going back and forth with it, and he's again trying to feed me all the genetics. I'm like, Shane, here, fucker, buy a bell and buy a normal for me. I'll give you a fucking deal. breed them, and then you could do all your Frankenstein bullshit with it and try to prove me wrong and figure out what's what. And he never did it. So Shane, I'm calling you on again. But yeah, it's been a shitstorm ever since that Super Bell terminology has been thrown out there. I guess now Alec Nigerian, I remember he got a hold of me like a year ago. He sent me pictures of a buddy of his that same thing. He had 2 bells and he produced normals. And then he just hatched out normals out of his 2 bell the bells. And then Alex Monslave, a Dragon's buddy, he produced normals from a bell to bell breeding. So it's definitely gaining a little more traction and like, you know, hey, there's something there. Because for the longest time, it was always the assumption, and this is what I've always been told by like Australians, like if you breed a bell to a bell, all you're getting is bells. You're not producing any normals. You breed a normal to a normal, you're never producing bells. When you mix them, then you're getting, you know, whatever, your different percentages. Like my first couple clutches, the first clutch that I produced, all normals. Second clutch, I had 1 bell hatch out of that. And then as the clutches progressed, I started getting to where it's like, you know, normal bell. And then, you know, my 15-20 clutch, it's like bell, normal, bell, you know, there was like 50% right down the middle there. So it does increase. So again, the Python genetic guys and the people that know the genetics and all that, there's obviously something there, but you know, in all essence, the bells are basically, they're just a morph. Is what I've been told and what I understand it to be, and you know, are just a weird anomaly that fits into it. So.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's. I think it'll be fun in the years to come to kind of see how we continue to figure out exactly what's going on. But we are at that midway point of the show, so I'm gonna play these couple of ads. Sit tight, everybody, and we'll see you on the other side of our little commercial break here.
Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. You know, longevity is one of the biggest things I strive for when it comes to thinking about being a part of the reptile industry. That's why I'm very proud about today's sponsor, Mark Bailey over at Mark Bailey Reptiles. 40 plus years, full-time reptile keeper, enthusiast. This guy, you can catch all his amazing ball python projects on MORPH Market. So make sure you head over to MORPH Market, and that's Mark Bailey Reptiles on MORPH Market. See what he has available currently. And I got to tell you one thing, he's one of the biggest and most respected ball python breeders we have today in the ball python game. So shout out to Mark Bailey over at Mark Bailey Reptiles. Thank you for all the support. And again, make sure you head over to his account on MORPH Market, see what he has available. Thank you so much, Mark Bailey over at Mark Bailey Reptiles. One of the biggest growths we have in the reptile industry today are the rare species of reptiles that aren't worked with. That's right. That's why I went ahead and partnered up again with Bryan Susan over at SUNDOWN Reptiles. Bryan works with species such as kahua geckos, gargoyle geckos, all species of tree monitors. He works with abronia and many other cool species geckos that you can check out all on his website. Head over to sundownreptiles.com, see what he has available. Bryan's one of the best doing it in the reptile industry today. He's been on the show multiple times, so make sure you check out all of Bryan Susan's episodes on Trap Talk Reptile Network. But more importantly, for the highest quality of captive bred reptiles, make sure you head over to sundownreptiles.com and make sure you give him a follow on Instagram. Thank you again, Bryan Susan over at Sundown Reptiles. Cheers. Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. If you're in the ball python game, then you know one of the biggest buzzes going around the hobby as far as reptile shows go is the new Southeast Reptile Expo being thrown by Bob Vu and his crew. Thank you so much, Bob, for being a part of this year's sponsor on the Trap Talk Reptile Network. Very excited to collaborate with you. I'm excited to actually be heading over to Southeast Reptile Expo in February, and that's February 15th and 16th. You can catch me there. And there's also that show coming in September, so stay by for more announcements on that. Head over to Southeast Reptile Expo on Instagram and check out Alana Atlanta's #1 reptile show, the newest up-and-coming, most exciting show around in the reptile hobby, and who else better to throw it than Bob Voos. Shout out to today's sponsor, and that is the COCO Dude, #1 chipper substrate in the game. Everything you see behind me, all my emerald tree boas, my green tree pythons are all over that beautiful COCO chip over at cocodude.com. Go to cocodude.com, place your order. I prefer the COCO to go. It's already broken down, less dust, the chunks are perfect. But yes, I like the COCO to go. No matter what your total is in your cart, if you put in TRAPFAM25 in the promo code, you are now going to get 25% off your entire order. Thank you so much, the COCO Dude, for doing that for all my trappers. Again, #1 substrate in the game. Less duck sheds, less dust. It's the best place to be, and that's the COCO Dude. Again, cocodude.com. Put in promo code TRAPFAM25 and get yourself 25% off the entire order. Thank you so much, COCO Dude. Cheers.
Alrighty, we are back from our commercial break, and I'm going to shoot this one over to Alex for our next topic.
Yeah, as I say, so, Steven, you sort of highlighted, keeping lace around, and then, Brian, you're talking about just, for lack of a better term, not being a shit keeper to ensure that your laces are sticking around. But, you've been name dropping Alec, who I've seen in the chat. I've actually had the pleasure of speaking with him a couple of times. One thing I'm curious about, with your...
He was at Monitor Fest.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
jerk off who ran through the fence with the thing on his collar.
Oh, trust me, how could I forget that? Yeah, the shock collar, nonetheless. But
yeah.
What happens at Monitor Fest stays at Monitor Fest. But I'm curious, for the sake of Alec as a younger individual, and again, you've been really breeding lace and just getting him out there. Has mentorship played sort of a big role in you trying to ensure that they stick around? Are there a lot, you mentioned Mason Barnes as well. Obviously you said these lizards are not for everybody.
Yeah.
But it's also imperative that they don't just disappear like the Bengal monitor, as we've discussed. And do you, in your experience, I guess, sort of maybe highlight some of the important, I guess, lessons, or, what have you had to do as sort of the lace teacher per se? It's sort of you've talked about the history of them, but now you're sort of trying to line up some newer people to ensure that history keeps on going. Maybe that sounds way too crazy. But...
No, it makes perfect sense. Alec is a perfect example. And he's a young kid, so there's a lot of hope because he definitely has the passion. Mason is another one. He's got the passion for lace. But Alec he did everything up and down, and I was mentoring him and dude, you need to do this, you need to do that. And he's like, oh, I'm like, fucking do it this way. And eventually he came around and he got dialed in. And I remember he called and he was all bummed out. He's like, dude, I don't know what happened. This fucking the female's all deflated and she's eating. I'm like, all right, what's going on? I'm like, are you sure she didn't lay? He's like, no, I tore up that. I'm like, I'm telling you. And he's sending me pictures. I'm like, dude, she laid. You have eggs. You have to find them. And he was like, I'm telling you, no, it didn't happen. I'm like, Alec, you got eggs. Trust me. And, he was just scratching around the nest box. Nest box is, 14 inches, whatever. He was here. I'm like, you need to fucking go in there and rip that whole fucking thing apart. And he's like, oh, man, I don't know. I'm like, I'm telling you, do it. Half hour later, he fucking called me. I think he was in tears. He found the clutch, and there was all these fucking eggs on it. I'm like, I fucking told you, man. So being a mentor, I'm one of the few guys out there who, if you listen to any of my previous podcasts, I explained in detail how to breed these motherfuckers. Because I'm not I got a couple secrets up my sleeve that I don't tell you. I don't give a shit. I want people to be able to get them. I want them out here for as long as possible. As long as I'm still breathing and alive, I'll be breeding them. So as far as them disappearing, I won't have anything to do with it. and as much as I can help. But
Sure.
yeah, I have no problem mentoring to anybody who actually is serious about them and, you know, gets a hold of me in a serious manner and not like, yo, what the fuck? How do I do it? You know, that kind of shit, which fucking drives me crazy. But no, as far as mentorship, yeah, you need to. I mean, hats off to Dave Kirshner, aka Croc Doc, who is my mentor, who held my hand, and I listened to him to a T, exactly how he did it. And every time I fucked up, he's like, "You're not listening to me. You need to do this, this, and this." And then I would correct it, and bam, I did it, and I did it, and I did it, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I have no problem mentoring, and I think that, you know, anybody, I mean, like Stefani, another great dude. He doesn't hide anything. There's no, hey, bro, I'm not going to tell you how to fucking do it. He'll fucking, you know, Mike has no problem being like, I do this, I do that, I do that. And, you know, you take it at his word. Daraka, another one who, you know, has bred the shit out of monitors. Bryan is unbelievable on the amount of stuff that he's bred. He doesn't get any credit for. But he's bred the shit out of turtles, iguanas, boas, pythons. He's bred a lot of stuff. And on top of it, he's bred more monitors than I have. But it was the same thing where with the lace, he's like, hey, it's a little different. I'm like, just do this, do this, do that. He did it to a T, and bam, clutch after clutch after clutch. So I'm always available as a mentor if you're a serious keeper, not a schmuck. Yeah. But I think over time, you know, like I said, people like Alec, people like Mason Barnes, you know, these, you know, even Alec, Alec's perfect example. Your passion for your sail fins, you know, 5 years from now, you're going to meet another Alex like you, and you're going to be like, dude, do this, do that, and you'll produce them. So that's one hope of this hobby, and one hope I guess I have is I've seen how much it is just gone from, we keep a couple and, you know, I've had luck, but I'm not going to tell you how I did it. So, like, everyone, like, dude, do this. Brian Susan, one of the guy who ran the ad. Awesome guy, dude. Brian, he's like, you know, put your cages like this. I when I was doing tree monitors, I had everything set up, and he's like, buy this cork, buy this cage, buy that. And I did everything that Brian said, and fortunately, I just never pursued it as much as he did, but you know, Brian Susan, another great guy that'll tell you, hey, this is how you do it. Matt Kosman, another tree monitor guy, has been around forever, who won't hide anything. He'll be like, hey, this is how you do it. Kathy Brown, same thing, another tree monitor breeder. You know, she'll tell you, you know, she'll talk your ass off. Be like, oh, you got to do this, do that, do that. I mean, there's a lot of us that are out there that, you know, will put in the time and the effort and have no problem explaining and helping anyone that's serious about doing it. You know, my other buddy, Rob Faust, big Nile monitor guy. He produced ornates back in the day. He wrote a book. Rob's another guy. If you call him and you're like, hey, I'm really wanting to breed Niles and ornates, he'll talk your ass off. He'll be like, no, you need to do this and you need to do that. And Rob's a great guy, man, and he will set you straight. So I don't think, Alex, I guess answer your question, the mentorship and the possibilities are limited as far as, you know, being able to make it happen. I mean, there's obviously people out there breeding them. I mean, you know, I've never given Alex, you know, Monslave any like hints like, hey, you should do it like this. He obviously bred them. Same with John. And then what the hell is the other place? That Cold-Blooded Shop in Florida. They're obviously producing them. Mm. So, but again, that being said, I've yet to, you know, really turn down anybody who's serious about these guys. To be like, no, you need to do this and you need to do that. And, you know, Alec is a perfect example. And Daraka is another perfect one because, again, they just, you know, I was there for them like, dude, do this, do that, and it'll work. It'll make it happen. And they did it. And, you know, the results are there. So,
Yeah, I mean, really, the whole mentorship thing, that's what makes this industry go round. And really, the only way to, pay it back is to pay it forward. In the way that I see it, if you have somebody who is mentoring you and they want something in return other than maybe some credit and some recognition for what you did, that's not the person you want by your side. You don't want someone giving you information being like, now what are you gonna do for me? It's like someone gave you that same information 20 years ago, and now you're gonna hold it over the next generation's head. Like, that's not what this is about. It's that free flow of information. Because what can you really do for someone? I mean, like, for instance, like the information that you've given Alec about breeding his laces, what could he do that would be equivalent of that, other than telling the next generation the same exact thing that you just did for him?
Exactly. Keep breeding them, and then be that next mentor for the next serious guy who's a diehard for lace or Gilas or whatever the fuck. And again, going off the script here a little bit, that's one thing about Scott Flood with the Bolins that I met Scott a year and a half ago, and he's like, dude, out there, you could do this. He's not hiding anything as far as, hey, this is how I breed the Bolins. This is what I've been doing, and it's like, well, I can't be more humble than getting just solid answers from you, and you have nothing to hide, and you're at the top of the game with him right now, and he could be a complete fucking dick and be like, I'm not telling you anything, and I just bred him, figure it out, kind of a deal. So
I mean, how he's managed that project is super admirable for a lot of different reasons. And I also I love what he's done as far as pricing the animals go, because I feel like most people who would be in that situation would say, okay, well, if the wild caughts are 12 grand a nerd, I'm gonna go 16, and then at that point, I mean, if you're selling, in this instance, baby Bolin's pythons, it could be anything. It could have been the croc monitors when they were first being produced, a couple of years ago. If you're selling an individual snake for $16,000, you're virtually guaranteeing that animal will never be bred, because the amount of people who can buy two $16,000 snakes, I mean, and then also, that's a money guy who is doing this as like a fun hobby with his cars and his guns. That's probably not a hardcore, herpetoculturist who's been doing this for, however long, to be prepared for an animal like that.
And it's a hard balance too, because then, again, it's a gamble. It's where, if, let's say there was no Don and no Egan and no Dragnet, no Alex or whatever, I was the only guy who had lace.
Yeah.
And, I'm way at the top, and I'm like, all right, well, my lace are 10 grand a piece.
Yeah.
So I'll sell them to serious buyers, but after a couple of years, I'm like sitting on hatchlings.
Right.
So I mean, I get the run and gun aspect of it, and I've always used this analogy with perennies, where one of these days, hopefully, I'll get them, but it's one of those deals where 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, or whatever, if I get them, probably at the third year of fucking producing them, I'll get some schmuck to be like, oh, dude, you want like $6 grand for a perennial? I'm like, yeah. Ugh, well, that's kind of high. It's like, nobody has them, stupid. It's like, you can't wait for the fresh import. So, that's the going price of it. But in the same regard, too, where you can't, I don't know, just out budget yourself to where, I feel bad for some of these water monitor guys, because they're such a prolific species, and now you got 30 of them,
right?
And you got all these different genetics or whatever. Kind of like Shane, the fucking water monitors he produced were unbelievable, and his price ranges are all over the place, and hopefully he was able to get rid of all of them. But it's part of it's like, dude, do you want to do that again for the next 5 years and just keep going and going and going? And it's like, sooner or later, this shit catches up to you. I mean,
for sure.
I'm not a big ball python guy, and personally, I just wish that, you know, these reptile shows had a smaller section of ball pythons and not fucking row after row after row after Tinley after row after row. But to some extent, it's like you guys are you're killing each other, because it's like you're always just one step away from outdoing one another, and you know the price just keeps going and going and going. And it's like you're not going to be happy until you produce something that's fucking invisible with two black eyes and be like, it's right there. That's a snake. You know?
Yeah, I never understood that like the need to be in the rat race. I always felt like, you know, making your own lane, doing your own project, pioneering something was the way to go, both from a financial standpoint and from an enjoyment standpoint as well, of, you know, not stressing over how do I sell my, you know, my new 6-gene ball python for $200 less than the next guy. And
exactly.
You know, it just, I don't know. But I guess you can't really blame people for it, because for the longest time, that was the introduction to, you know, the hobby and to,
well, yeah, ball pythons, bearded dragons. Thank God for them, because that definitely elevated this hobby to, you know, to supersize it to where it is now. Which, you know, if it wasn't for those two species, yeah, you know, a lot of these deals would still be in the back alleys and like, you know, hey, I got this. What do you think? You know, I mean,
yeah,
it's just how it goes. But I don't, you know, like I said, they're both cool species. I just don't, you know, have a particular desire for them. I see it at times. It's like, geez, you guys are just, you know, killing each other because you're always trying to just outdo the next guy. And, you know, you add the retics to it too. I mean, you know, it's crazy. It's a cutthroat kind of industry at times. But I guess the aspect of it too is then you kind of, I don't know, I guess if you ask some of these ball python guys who have, you know, 200-300 pairs, not catchling, like just all these, you know, it's like, do you have a passion anymore? Or is this a 9-to-5 now?
Right.
And then on top of that, it's blood money. You need to sell them because, you know, you're not working. I mean, I thankfully, I have, you know, a career job, even though I'm not working right now because of my fucking knees. But that being said, you know, I'm able to do this as a hobby and still have a passion for it. To where, I mean, you know, back in the day, you guys remember Chris Brown from Vital Exotics?
Yeah.
I've heard the name. Oh, well, I didn't, Steven, I believe the female water monitor Rob had at the Discovery Center came from Vital. Because she was like one of those really clean, remember the one that he bred with Grug, which was Nicolas Cage's monitor. For all the listeners, they just had Rob Carmichael on Mike Stefani and Jen Black's show, All Monitor Talk. But when Stephen was working there, I was a volunteer. If I'm not mistaken, we had received a female water monitor. I forget the locale. It was a normal phenotype water monitor, not a morph or anything, but it had like really clean bands. And I want to say Rob got her from Deb Crone, who was a traveling reptile educator. But
was it a guru?
Yeah, probably. I feel like that sounds right. I knew I was about to say like Burma or like but I remember like the U and R in there. But yeah,
guru, it was probably a guru.
Yeah,
Chris was a perfect example of that guy had all the passion in the world, and he, you know, he finally achieved what he wanted. And I remember telling him, like, dude, don't quit your day job, because if you do this full time, you're done. You know, there's very few people that are able to, you know, to make it happen. And he did for X amount of years, but he finally, it got to the point to where he's like, dude, I'm overproducing. He was, you know, breeding the shit out of retics, breeding the crap out of water monitors, and he was killing it. But, you know, supply and demand. And after a while, it's like, you know, if I don't sell, you know, 10 grand worth of animals this week, I'm screwed, because I have the mortgage, I have this, I have that, you know, that stuff all compiles and all that. So, you know, it's definitely a hard racket if, you know, you're not able to deal with the ebb and flow of how, you know, stuff happens. I mean,
It's tough.
again, not to, rip on people that are breeding like prolific stuff. Thankfully, like I said, lace are not real, that they don't produce a shitload of hatchlings.
Right.
And they take a long time to hatch. So that's the other half of it too, where that, there's a little spurt of them and then it just dies down and then they come back a little bit. But, put it like this, if you 5 years ago, when I started 6 years ago, whatever, and there were like Nile monitors where you get 40 babies, and we're on this podcast today, and you'd be like, "Hey, you dealing with the lace anymore?" We're like, "Nope, done." I bred the shit out of them. Couldn't sell the babies. I had to give them away. There's just too many. It's kind of, it'll burn you out. Especially with monitors, because again, space, daily requirements, the whole 9 yards. So, I guess my point is that it killed Chris, unfortunately, because Chris was a great guy. Fucking love him. He's selling bison now. He's like a farmer, rancher, or whatever. But I think it really, just killed him that he couldn't keep up with it anymore, and he just, couldn't do it. And
sorry, go for it.
No, it just, being in that position, it killed it. It killed the passion.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I think that could be used as a cautionary tale for anybody who, does want to try to pursue a full-time reptile career of like, don't choose a species that has a low ceiling for market capacity, like a water monitor or mainland retic. Kind of like, at least, for me, like when I look at animals that I want to work with, not only do I know what I like to keep and what I'm interested in, but also, something that kind of fits in the middle of the spectrum of like a ball python and like a water monitor of, not so common that I'm competing with thousands of other breeders, but then nothing where, like, for instance, like with the croc monitors, how many customers are there truly going to be for your captive bred croc monitor if you're a croc monitor breeder?
and dedicated at that point too.
Right. And somebody who not just has the money to buy a captive bred croc monitor, but will actually be able to care for that animal properly. I guess probably just because the industry was founded on so many of these giant species like berms, retics, sulcatas, iguanas, like that was just kind of assumed that this is what we do. But especially with the social media age and everything that's going on these days, I feel like that the goalpost there is coming in, and there's the animals that we think are the next biggest and best thing are kind of shrinking. And I feel like lace kind of fit that niche perfectly of a big monitor, but like you said, with the lower production, and females aren't really the biggest animals in the world. They're kind of right on the edge of like too big for most keepers, but still you get that fix of a large monitor, kind of like with the scrub pythons for me, of it's right on the edge of like, this is a big snake, but it's not a
super heavy bodied giant.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's funny. I was coming back from New South Wales when I was in Australia, and word to the wise, if you ever go out there, get the supplemental car insurance if they offer it to you, if you rent a car, because fucking kangaroos. I'm driving back at night, and there's no street lights, in the middle of nowhere.
Sure.
And fucking kangaroos, dude, they're not, like 10 of them. There's like 100 of them just crossing the fucking road, and I thought I was gonna fucking hit one. And they're big. They'll, wipe out the front end of your car.
Sure.
So I finally make it out of New South Wales, and I'm headed back to my hotel or inn I'm staying. And I'm on a 2-lane road, and there's a, like a what do you call it? Your medium, but it's got like the fence rail, the guide, the solar, like the aluminum, whatever. So I'm coming up to my exit where I got to get off. Actually, I got to get off on the right. And there's like an embankment, and then the rest of that split guardrails there. And there was a scrub python that was coiled underneath the base of there, just sitting on the road, like sucking up the heat. And it had to be like every bit of fucking 18 feet. That thing was enormous. It was just a big pile of rubber like this. And I'm like, holy shit, that's a fucking giant fucking python just sitting in the middle of the fucking, in the medium there, just warming up on the road. I caught like maybe 5 seconds of it with my headlights, and I had to get off, and I'm like, fuck. I'm like, and then my exit like went all the way. I'm like, there's no way to get off here, and then drive back into fucking traffic, and then try to catch the fucking thing. And I'm like, what am I gonna do with it then? It's longer than me, and then it's like, yeah. But yeah, no, it wasn't all right. What are the big ones out there? They're not scrubs. Yeah, they were scrubs, right?
Yeah, the kinghorn eye, the Australian scrub. Yeah,
Yeah,
Southern Australian scrub.
the steam python.
Yeah, big fucker.
Yeah, that would be my dream come true, or one of them of, coming across a giant ass scrub in Australia.
I tell you, nothing beats your dream species and then finding it in the wild in their natural habitat. It is, you'll never forget it.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, I guess then good topic. Walk us through, what was that like seeing laces in the wild?
It was insane. I went out there in 2000.
Okay.
I was out there for almost 3 weeks, which might as well have been a day because Australia is freaking huge.
Yeah.
And I went to Brisbane. I landed in Brisbane, and I stayed in Toowoomba, which was the smallest town over, or whatever. Mm. So there was a natural preserve or whatever. It's called Crow's Nest, and I would go to Crow's Nest every day to look for lace. So I think it was my second day there. It's November, so it's like they're spring because they're switched around. Yeah. And I'm walking, all these, because they have natural paths out there. And I'm not seeing anything. It's cold, sun's up, but it's, like 50 degrees or whatever. I'm like, this sucks. So, at some point, it's like 10, maybe 11 o'clock or whatever. And I'm coming down. There's like a big hill, and it's not even it's like a small hill, maybe 40, 50 feet. And the trail comes down like this little hill, and then it terminates into like another big forested area, and there's another trail going on. And I could see something moving, and I realized it's fucking lace. Not only that, it's the lace. That lace that I found at first, he was the size of that one in the picture that you showed me holding.
Oh, wow.
Big guy.
He was huge.
He was
then.
Big fucking giant male.
Yeah.
But,
damn.
Yeah, he was every bit of that size.
Wow.
But he was real cold because he's like just slowly like, get the fuck away from me, kind of walking, off the trail into the under, in the bush or whatever. But all the everything is like this big because it's all dead from the winter and slowly growing.
Yeah.
I have a picture. I was trying to find a picture of it tonight, but like this is like the middle of his back, and my hand is like right in the middle, and he's like that much wide. He was so my hand is here, so here's one side of his back, and here's the other side of his back. So my hand fit in between it because of how big he was. And I ended up, I'm like taking pictures of them, and I picked them up, and everything I'm doing is completely fucking illegal. So if you go to Australia, don't fuck with anything because you get in trouble. Took a shit, like I probably burnt like 4 rolls of fucking film on them. Just taking all these pictures back when there was no smartphones and all that crap. So I was elated. Like it was like I'm like, birth of your kids, your first house, marriage, whatever, lace monitor. I mean, it's way up there. So I just, for like an hour, I was just enamored by him. And, I had enough with the hands on. I'm just let him go. And he was so fucking irritated that he finally found like the first tree that he could, and I treat him. So he went up probably 40 feet and he just sat there. Because like 2 hours later, I came back and I'm taking pictures of him because he's still sitting in that tree like, fucking Yankee. Got to fuck with me on this day. And he's just sitting all the way up in that tree trunk just to get away from me.
Yeah.
So that was like, the highlight of the, so far. I'm like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
So then a couple days later, I learned to buy like meat from a deli and just kind of throw it on the game trail because they had picnic tables everywhere and just kind of sit there and with binoculars kind of, bird watch, if you will.
Yeah.
And sure enough, here comes a lace walking down the game trail in a big S pattern, tongue flicking out. And they use the game trail because, it's a quick spot to here or to there, whatever. And I got to watch them through the binoculars, but the second you get upright, they like instantly froze and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And it's funny too is, I'm a big believer in monitor intelligence. But in particular, it's funny because Australians, they give lace like, just they're so smart and blah, blah, blah. And, they're just highly intelligent, Perenni and Komodos and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But they're dumb enough to not know where they fucking buried their eggs in the termite mound. So the lace that I spooked on the game trails, if you just picture a tree, and then there's a game trail running through it. Now, from their perspective, because they're super smart, they would run up, out this way or that way just to evade predators. But they're also super stupid because they have no memory of whatever. These lace, when I would spook them, they would run past 4 or 5 trees and go right up one particular tree. And they knew that tree and they're like, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
So their memory aspects, I think, are a lot more than they're given credit for. And a lot of it, too, is when it comes to nesting, because they bury their eggs in termite mounds exclusively. I know there's talk about them in tree hollows, whatever, but, there's very little conceivable evidence that it's a continuous situation. It's like, maybe there's a one-off that happens, but, like an immature female, her first year or whatever, but 99.9% of the times, termite mounds. But to think that they're not smart enough to realize, if I hang around at this picnic area, I know I could get fed, so I'm going to stay around here because I'll pick up scraps. But I'm too stupid to realize where I put my eggs in this termite mound, which is in my territory, and I know exactly every inch of my territory because there's only so many fucking miles, So the intelligence aspect of it, and not to go off on a tangent about that, but it just showed that, in, the wild aspect of it, like I said, the ones that I spooked, they knew exactly, like, fuck this tree, I'm going right here because I know this tree and I know exactly where there's a hole. I go in and I'm done and I'm out of danger.
Yeah.
So that was my experience at Crow's Nest. And then when I went further north up into, like I said, the Glass House Mountains range where Steve Irwin Zoo was at, I was at Noosa State Park. And there was like you come in the parking lot, you got like the lodging area where like the game wardens and all that shit are sitting there. It's like all these picnic tables over here. And I'm telling the game warden, I'm like, hey, I'm here to look for lace monitors. I got my stupid binoculars and all that shit. And they're like, oh, yeah, mate, go up the trail, blah, 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 you know. And I'm like, all right, I'll go over here. So I'm like walking the whole 3 or 4 miles looking for them. I can't find fucking any of them. Because the trees are fucking mad. And I'm further north, so it's a little more tropical. It's a lot more colorful and all that crap. Can't find anything. I come back, and the game warden deals here, like the lodging, whatever, and then all the picnic tables. And there's all these tourists, and right in there having lunch, and these fucking lace monitors just start coming out of nowhere. And they're all just, you know, like overnight they slept in the sewer grates because it's warm to stay out of the element. And then they come out and they know that when there are people eating, they're going to get fucking scraps. So there's like 15 of them just cruising around like one big male, like, you know, the dominant male in the area. But it was just cool to see that, you know, they came out of everywhere. And I got pictures. And I'm like, holy shit, they're coming out of the sewer grate and all that. And like, oh, yeah, they're here all the time. I'm like, fucker, when I came here, I told you what I was looking for. And you could have told me, hey, by the way, just sit out here for another 2 hours. They're coming out of the sewer grates because they know people are coming. And they'll, you know, they'll binge for fucking scraps and all that shit. So,
hilarious.
So there, that was that. And I remember, Alex, you get a kick out of this. So I met this guy on the way after I'm done at what do you call it, Noosa. I'm driving on the highway or whatever, and there's you know, live reptile attractions, whatever. It's like a, you know, a sideshow reptile, you know, on the side of the road kind of deal. Mm-hmm. So I met this guy. I go into his shop and all that, and you know, he's got like all these big carpets, all these big what do you call it, scrubs, diamonds, all that crap. Nothing monitor-wise, like a couple of Ackies. I'm like, you fucking cock. I'm like, I'm in Australia, and you got Ackies. I'm like, really? You don't have Spencer's, you know, you got nothing? So he used to work for Steve Irwin, and he's like, oh, I got, you know, free pass, so you want to go, you know, we'll go. I'm like, all right, cool. I think his name was Andrew Melrose. I still have his info in my big lace file. I want to say that was his name. And we go to the zoo, and at some point we're walking down this, it's like a path going through Steve Irwin Zoo here, and there's like a little bridge that we got to go over. To the right is one of the ponds for like Argo, one of the big saltwater crocs, and then to the left is like another saltwater croc. Can't remember the name of it, but the bridge is like, you know, like a arch kind of shape. So we're walking across it. Me and him are like talking like this. And I take a step, dude. I kicked a fucking water dragon like this big, a big male, that was sitting on the foot of the bridge. I didn't see it, and I just booted it. So he grabbed it. He's like, I'm taking this fucking home. I'm like, no shit. He's like, yeah, fuck that. He's like, it's mine. So he took that fucking water dragon home. So we got to see the whole tour. Took a shitload of pictures of, they had a bell in this big circular, kind of a concrete moat cage. It was just hanging on a log. Took a bunch of pictures of them. All the perennials were outside. Took a whole bunch of pictures of them. Talked to a couple of keepers. I mean, it was, you know, kind of cool, but, you know, it was really kind of like, hey, time's up, mate. Yeah, you gotta go. And I'm like, all right, bye. So I go to fucking Andrew's house after, because he had to drop off this fucking water dragon. And I meet his wife, his dog Angus, I think his kid or two or whatever, but we're just hanging out, shooting shit, and we're talking about monitors and all that. And fucking, we're looking at like all these snake racks. And he's like, hey, put your hand out. I'm like, all right. So I got my hand out like this. And he grabs a fucking snake and just drops it in my hand. It's a fucking hatchling death adder. And I'm like, you fucking kidding me? It's like, oh, I thought you'd get a kick out of it. And I'm like, all right, thank you. And I just like dumped it back in the fucking cage he had. He gave me a fucking heart attack. I'm like, fucking maniac.
Christ.
Yeah. he ironically, so for the rest of my trip, I saw like a big iris monitor, and I pulled over on the side of the road. It actually was a guldi, Varanus guldi. But they're unconscious of cars. But the second you break the barrier, they're gone. And then that thing was like, just like a road runner. He disappeared within seconds. So for the most part, like, I'd like go back to Crow's Nest, check out the lace that were kind of cruising around, but that was kind of like, the extent of it. Because again, I was only out there for so long. But years later, I stayed in contact with them. Again, writing letters, not, I'll text you. And then like email and shit. But he had, and basically, he believed that he found blue tail monitors out there. And I had blue tail monitors at the time, Dorianus. And he's like, hey, can you send me pictures of like hatchlings and adult? So I sent them like photos, like 35 millimeter photos and all that. And then fast forward to like 3 years ago, Daniel Natouche basically solidified that actually Dorianus are in Australia.
Whoa.
I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah. The other cool thing too is that Andrew had that's another cool lace thing is he took me to this area. They were clearing the land, and they cleared some termite mounds. So I got to see like, a termite mound is like, all right, this is like 6 feet above the surface because their termite mounds are fucking huge.
Yeah.
So when they cleared it and they clipped off the top of it, I got to see like the guts of the termite mound. And that's why the substrate that I put inside their nest box it's like coffee grounds, because that's kind of how the inside of the termite mound looks. It's because the termites, they make their little tunnels and all that crap. But like at the center is usually where the lace female will dig into that termite mound. She gets to that center of that mound, and they deposit their eggs there. And then basically, because at the center of the mound, it's kind of the nexus of the mound. It's like, this is the heartbeat. We need to take care of everything here. So it's a symbiotic relationship, because basically the eggs are in there. They're not a threat to the termites, but they don't want them to get moldy and become a threat. So they constantly, they're cleaning the eggs. So the lace eggs, once they're sitting in that termite mound, they're completely protected from the elements and from predators. That's why I think they also have a higher survivability in the wild, kind of like tree monitors. I don't think that even croc monitors, species that, only produce, 6 to 8 eggs, and maybe 4 hatchlings make it, they're not getting picked off immediately, like waters, Niles, blackthroats, you name, like more prolific species, because otherwise you never have them. So, the termites, they take care of those eggs because they don't want them to rot. And then when they finally hatch, they kind of stay in that central chamber, and then basically the female comes back and just digs up that tunnel, and then they make their way out. She makes her way back in and lay the next clutch.
Yeah, it's a fascinating process. It's so cool that they found that little niche that works so well for that purpose, and then just kind of became a habitual mainstay of that species in the wild.
Now monitors do the same thing.
Okay.
With the termite mounds. Yeah. But supposedly they'll nest in, like river banks and rotted lumber and whatever other fucking theories, but it's always been termite mounds. This is probably why lace and Niles have always been like my number 1 and 2, because they have a huge range, a lot of variability in their pattern. They nest in termite mounds. the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And they're both relatively about the same size.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've always really been kind of like curious as to why more people aren't interested in Nile monitors, just for the fact of how beautiful they are. I know they're common, they come in a lot, but I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that those animals are what they are. I mean, they're, you know, you can make an argument they're nicer than most water monitors, like visually speaking.
The problem with Niles is that they're, which, you know, I've explained this quite a few times, not ripping on you, Steve.
No, you're good.
Is, you know, I just made this analogy. I've made this analogy forever. But basically, you know, Niles are tenacious and they have that, you know, I guess attitude, if you will, is because, you know, they're in an area that they are surrounded by apex predators. They have to be cocksuckers. They have to be able to fight. They have to basically on a daily basis be like, hey, fuck you want? You know, you want to go? Me and you right now. You know, that mentality helps keep them alive because, you know, they're constantly being, you know, put on a spot because everything out there will eat them. Or waters, after they hit a certain size and, you know, they're in certain localities, it's like, you know, nobody's going to screw with them. They're the apex predator. The downside of Niles is that, you know, again, they just, that tenacity and that general fight that they have, they don't give it up. You know, this is, you know, how many years of evolution, like fight, and fight. So it's not something you're just going to work out of them within, you know, a couple months of like, oh, I've been feeding them by hand or whatever. I mean, and it kills me too is that people, like I've had big adult Niles that, you know, were shitheads, you know, when they're 2 or 3 feet long. And people see them at that size, and then they want them. And it's like, well, if you bought a baby and you just raise it up and you don't fuck with it, this is what will happen. This is the end result. So, you know, put a little time into it. But, you know, again, they're a throwaway species. I hate to say it, but, you know, it's like, you know, iguanas, Niles, savannas, you know, all these animals that they're brought in so many freaking numbers. It's like, you know, pisses me off right now with this whole ESA bullshit with the blue tree monitors. It's like, why don't you do that to fucking Niles? Do that with savannas. Do it with iguanas. Do it with species that you've been bringing in by the thousands over the last 20 years. You know, all this Indo shit, water dragon. You know, it's like, do it with them. You know, you finally got a good foothold with people that are actually doing the work, and you got to fuck it all up. Yeah. But then shit like Niles that again are I personally I wish Niles were like $800,000-$900,000 a piece. Yeah. And I wish ornates were probably like $2,000. So people wouldn't shit all over them and just have them as throwaway pets. And I think that's the biggest downfall with those two species is because, you know, they're always available. And they're always, you know, lied about and, you know, oh, they're a great captive. You know, they get 3 feet long. You can feed it crickets, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know, seriously?
Yeah, no, it's super frustrating. So I've been trying to kind of figure this exactly out. You might have some insight on this with the Blue Tree Monitor listing. Was there any actual real science that was used to back the decision, or was this kind of an arbitrary, bureaucratic, hey, this seems like a good optical move. Let's
no, it just started years ago when Daniel Bennett was still alive. Bennett was he was part of the CITES. He was like on the board for CITES. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he basically from a import-export kind of a deal, he looked at like the number. He's like, you know, the whole percentage kind of complex in his eyes was like, you know, these guys need to be protected. To some extent, I kind of agreed with it, where it's like, for years, you've been bringing all these fucking tree monitors in, and nobody's doing anything with them. So basically, there was a push to put them, you know, as Appendix 1. So
Yeah.
the greens, the blacks, blues, a whole lot. Blacks in particular, the Beckerai, because, Aru Island is the only island they're from.
Right.
And if Aru got wiped out, no more black tree monitors. So that
Yeah.
was supposedly, that was going to be the first one put on Appendix 1,
Okay.
through CITES. But Daniel, I don't know whatever happened with the pushback, if there was, more data that was collected in the wild, like, hey, they're not as threatened as you think, or there's a good population of this and that. So the pushback happened, and it kind of, I don't know, it died on a vine, I guess. And then Daniel, unfortunately, passed away, and that was the last I heard of any of the percentage going, Appendix 1. I do know Michael Cole, who had the coli monitor named after him.
Yeah.
When Varanus Molinas was going to be, they were proposed to go on CITES 1, Appendix 1, the whole 9 yards. He fortunately stepped in, and he was part of the data collection out there to be like, dude, Molinas monitors are fucking everywhere in the Moluccans. They're nowhere near and threatened or endangered. He's like, they're fucking in abundance.
Yeah.
So that was basically wiped out. So fast forward to, a couple months ago, I don't know, I guess Indo has been, for a while, they've been talking about how, they need to put they got to step up their quota kind of a deal. And we need to limit that's why croc monitor prices have gone through the friggin' roof.
Yeah.
There's that aspect, and again, the, internet finally making its way out there. And, some of the exporters are like, I sold you that croc monitor for $1,200 and you're selling it for $8,000. So I need to make some money on it.
Yeah.
So that hasn't helped, but, obviously there's always, deforestation, there's, the environment, climate change, all the regular bullshit that they, hey, this is a threat. This is what's happening. So they're, for whatever reason, they targeted blue trees, and, it's just something that's been obviously in the works for, probably the last couple of years. And they finally well, all right, we're going to, make these guys an ESA species along with the earless monitors and then the fly rivers. So, how they came to that conclusion, I don't know, because maybe there's research out there that has conducted, some kind of census data. They're like, hey, we got a really limited amount of blue trees in their natural habitat, or are they again going off of, quota numbers coming out of Indo, and, they're like, well, we looked at 500 that were exported to 4 different countries, and, the mortality rate is, 0.1. I mean, it's kind of like, well, I don't know. Are you guys looking at that aspect? Are you doing actual, collection data? I mean, it's all over the board. But currently, I don't think it's going to help the species. All the people that are breeding with them. I mean, blue trees are the whole percentage complex has just skyrocketed over the last 5 years. People are breeding them like crazy. So now you're going to add more bullshit to it. And then on top of that, you're going to screw the people that are actually doing good work. I mean, you're not going to take the animals here and repopulate them out there. That's not a possibility. So who are you helping here? Nobody. So my fear is that it's not going to stop with the blues. It's not going to stop with the fly rivers, and it's not going to stop with the, what was the other one? The earless monitors.
Lanthanotus.
For a while. I mean, again, over my lifetime of knowing people in this hobby and all that, for a while they're going to shut down South America. like say goodbye to iguanas and pterosaurs and all that crap. And then it was going to be Africa. They were shutting down Africa, which they did to some extent. Like certain aspects of Africa, you can't get shit. But it's kind of like it's like every 8 to 9 years. Like, hey, dude, just coming down the pipe, they're going to shut down everything here. Yeah. Like you can't get anything out of Peru. You can't get anything in Brazil. You can't get anything out of, South Africa, so on and so forth. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate that this is where we're at with it. But, yeah, I guess the only thing that'll help it, but even right now, it's, if it's a stay, you're not going to be able to fight it. It would have to, you'd have to get somebody with some credibility to go out to like Batanta and all that, and actually do like a real field survey and be like, yeah, the population's actually doing quite well, and there's large numbers or whatever. But I don't know if there's the financial backing to do that to help the pet industry, as opposed to do it to help promote, all right, yeah, we need to make them CITES 1 or Penix 1. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a mess. Yeah.
Well, to not end on a negative topic, I guess I'll throw kind of a fun one out for the end. I know at this point you're very locked in with what you're doing, but is there a species or two, could be a monitor, could be whatever, that you would see yourself potentially adding to the group as a new project?
Well, I have I got a female ornate, which she's probably got like another year before she's ready to, she's adult or breedable size. I do have males at my fingertips at any point that I could get. And then Daraka, my buddy Bryan Daraka, I'm getting for his pastel blue tails that he hashed out.
Very cool.
I'll see what I could do with them. Outside of that, I mean, I got a big cage right now that I couldn't complete because my knees took a shit, and it was actually set up for these lace hatchlings that I'm getting. But I don't know. I might kind of redesign it and just plant the hell out of it and put like day geckos in there, or like a couple like chameleons or something.
Okay.
But like monitor wise, I'm just I'm hoping Alec produces his Argus monitors. I want some Argus from him. Daraka has he's got Molinas monitors. So I might get some from him, and then he's working with Uoni tricolors. Outside of that, nothing really. But again, it's gonna depend on what I could do cage wise, space wise, the whole 9 yards. I mean, there's only so much room that you have that you can kind of afford this. Actually, I feel bad. I was supposed to take MJ's lace monitors. Yeah, they should have been here by now, but I was running out of time, and then with my knees, I'm screwed. You're looking at like another 8-9 months before you do anything, because I still had to build cages for them. I have like 4 cages that I was in the middle of building and I haven't touched. So project wise, that's about it. If I was going to get anything else, maybe Kim's. And like Coming Eye, I was supposed to get some Coming Eye from Stefani. That worked out in his favor because it turns out he needed females. And if I could get some Cordensis, the Biak tree monitors from like Kosman or maybe Susan, those would be cool. That's like my favorite tree monitor.
Yeah, they're probably the most like interactive, curious, at least from the ones that I've experienced.
Yeah, those have always been my favorite. Actually, I had, unfortunately, right after I had the Bolins, I think I had my Mertens monitors then too. But I had a whole bunch of tree monitors. I had blacks, blues, and the cordensis. And both of you guys being from out here, Midwest, just how amazing all these storm fronts that come in make such a huge difference, especially the shittiest fucking time of the year. December, January, February, whatever. So all those barometric pressure changes and all these fronts that came in, the blacks, the blues, and my cordensers were breeding like crazy. And I had a shitty old hoverbear, which probably on me, I didn't hook up or set up correctly. So I had tree monitor eggs from all of them. And I had them all cooking. And everything was fine. I came home from work the one day, and I came down in the basement, checking on everything, and I look at the fucking hoverbaiter. And it's like at 105 degrees or whatever. I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. So I take the lid off real quick, and them eggs were as hard as fucking, they were stone. And I'm like, there's no fucking, I fucking killed all those eggs. I had, I don't know, I think 12 eggs. A couple blues, couple blacks, couple of cordenses. I kind of left them in there, kind of, messed around with the incubator a little bit here and there, but after, like the third or fourth day, they were still hard as a rock. I'm like, they're done. So that was it.
Yeah. Damn, that fucking blows. But
yeah.
It's part of what we do. So I guess the last thing I'll ask, if you had to add one snake project, what would your snake project be?
Well, the Bolins for one.
Yeah.
And years ago I had mangrove snakes. I'd love to get those back.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of hard to do if you had one and you could do that. I mean, I love snakes in general. I love pythons. I love colubrids and all that stuff. Yeah. I had some black-tailed fucking creepos that were dynamite.
Yeah. Dry mark. Top tier.
I had indigos back in the day. But yeah, them black tails were really, unfortunately, the one male, he died. I got them both from, what's her name? Virginia Madison. Awesome breeder. Great girl. But I had that male for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months when he died. And she was really like, oh, I'll do. I'm like, it's not on you. I don't want to. I'm like, it is what it is. I ended up selling off the female. But, yeah, Steve, it's, Bolins. I love freaking jungle carpets. I love diamonds. But then, like you said, you get in the colubrid stuff like the mangroves, I don't even think they're colubrids. But even like the cool bull snakes that we have out here, freaking Kankakee, I mean. So yeah, it's kind of hard to target. Probably the Bolins, I guess.
Yeah. I figured. Well, man, this has been an awesome episode. 2 hours and 15 minutes of.
I keep going.
I think Alex might be falling out of his chair almost over there.
I apologize if I've been dead for sort of the last half of the episode. It's been
don't worry about it.
Day, and it's already been a long week for me. But seriously, Brian, I mean, just a lot of good history in this episode, a lot of great experiences. One that I'm definitely going to be re-listening to just to make sure I haven't already forgotten some stuff in my current dazed and confused state. But we really appreciate you coming out, talking, having you on. And like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are, going to gain insight from this episode. But in my opinion, and more importantly, really, with the popularity of Lace, use this episode to ideally appreciate where they've come from and truly the work that has had to go into them. I mean, I had no idea, even from talking with you now for the past few years, like the entire aspect regarding Europe. The fact that, I mean, they'd been there for so long, now they're finally starting to get their claim staked here, and it's pretty incredible.
Yep. Long journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I feel like that makes it all the more fulfilling. So anyway, Bryan, for anybody who wants to keep track of what you got going on, inquire about availability or getting on a wait list or whatever, where can they find you on the internet?
I'm on Instagram under Waterloo_Lace. I'm easy to find me on there.
Cool.
Other than that, that's it. I'm not on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. I'm just on Instagram.
Cool. Yeah, that's the best one to be on. So you're doing that one right. Well, yeah, I mean, nothing more can be said, man. This has been an awesome episode. I really, really appreciate your time tonight. This was amazing. I love this episode.
Well, I appreciate you guys, inviting me. Alex, thank you especially for, mentioning it. Steve, it's nice to meet you, and
likewise.
It's kind of funny how we're all Chicago guys, and now we're all spread apart, Minnesota, Texas.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully your listeners who are snake guys enjoyed it as well.
For sure. I guarantee it. Well, again, man, thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been an incredible episode. We really both appreciate it very much.
No problem. Thanks again for having me on.
Yep. All right. Well, if you want to stick around until once we're done streaming, but Alex and I are just going to close this out real quick.
No problem.
All right. All right, Alex, man, that was awesome. Thank you for setting that up. What an episode.
Different style of episode, but definitely a good one. I mean, if you're going to do any episode sort of almost, again, like history of a species, let alone from somebody who helped quite literally pioneer it in, American herpetoculture, you might as well have the first episode be nobody else than Bryan Waterloo, right? I mean, that's say no more. And I said, I apologize if I'm dazed and tired, but truly a good episode. And hopefully this will set a precedent maybe for some more future guests that we can bring on talking about history of species X. I'm sure there's plenty of people that would love to share how they quite literally got some of the most common species we see today established.
Yeah, I absolutely love that idea. And I guess then for anyone who's listening, if you have any ideas as far as that goes, history of whatever, shoot either of us a message with a suggestion, because that would be cool to kind of make a little bit of a series out of that.
Definitely. Good
so we don't drag on too long, and so you can get to sleep over there. Where can everybody find you? Keep up with your Hydrosaurus and water dragon adventures. How do they get hold of you?
Yeah, Fauna Classifieds, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just look up alexsagamids, and that's all my pages. I haven't really been too active on social media lately, just because I'm not gonna lie, I've just been sort of burnt out of the social media stuff. I still respond to messages on there. Email is always the fastest way to reach out to me, hydrosaurinae@gmail.com, just because I'm typically check my email multiple times a day. And otherwise, if you don't reach me through there, expect 1 to 5 business days for a reply on all my social media pages. But that's the best way to reach out.
Cool, man. Well, I guess to do my, shout myself out at the end, you can find me on Instagram, scrubshepherd, Stephen Kush, Facebook, and then also Stephen Kush or Kush Reptile on YouTube as well these days. Got a new video coming out on Friday. It's going to be kind of a piggyback off of a recent podcast that I did of an overview of the scrub python complex, at least in terms of what we have in the U.S. in captivity. So I'm not going to be covering the Australian stuff, just snakes that I can hold in my hand and talk about. But it's a really awesome video, and I think it as far as YouTube goes, probably will be kind of the best resource out there as far as visually, putting a locality type to a snake and a little bit of a description of it, but kind of a little bit more of a visual representation of the podcast I did, which was a little bit more in depth. So got that going on. Of course, here every Wednesday for the Trap Talk Reptile Network. Please subscribe to us here on YouTube. A new podcast drops every single day of the week from a wide range of different guests covering lots of different topics. So if you're a reptile podcast fan, there is never a shortage of the absolute best content possible here on this channel. We're also on the audio platform, so Spotify, Apple Podcast, Buzzsprout, wherever you get your podcast from. Subscribe and a 5-star review would be absolutely amazing. With all that said, thank you guys for tuning in tonight, and we'll catch you all back here next week for a new episode.
Shout out to US ARC and all US ARC members. If you don't know what US ARC is, don't be ashamed. Just go ahead and click the third link in the description below. See what US ARC is all about, okay? You never know when legislations are going to hit your backyard, so that's why it's very important to consider becoming a US ARC member today. These numbers really do matter, and they look at it for consideration when it comes to battling legislation. So first and foremost, thank you, Phil Goss. Thank you to anybody out there who partners up and volunteers with US ARC organization. Thank you for anyone out there who's a US ARC member. And if you can't become a US ARC member today, please talk about it on your platforms. Let your neighbors know, let all your pet stores know what US ARC is here for, and it's here to fight for our animal rights. Thank you to every US ARC member and US ARC supporter out there. Choo!